since he's trying to have all of you be aware of your heritage, that I give some of my early experiences and life stories. But before I do, I want to tell a story about a little girl. A little third grader was eagerly looking forward to a new reader that they were going to have. And one of the stories in it was the story of Jonah. And the teacher said, as she started the story, now I want you to realize this is not a true story. This is just a myth, because there's no fish big enough to swallow a man. And the little girl raised her hand and she said, but my Sunday school teacher said, this is a true story. No, it's not a true story, the teacher said. The little girl said, well, when I get to heaven, I'll ask Jonah. And the teacher said, but what if he's not in heaven? And she said, well, then you can ask him. So we know that God is a God of miracles, and he took care of Jonah. He took care of me even when I was born. I often thank God that he let me be born safely, because it was wartime in Europe, and food was very scarce. And my mother tells me that she had no meat, no milk during that time at all. So when I was born, there were no doctors available. They were all at the front with the men. And the midwife didn't get there in time. But by the time she did, I was born. And Mama began to hemorrhage so badly that they didn't think she would survive. But anyway, I survived. And but was very, very puny till I was about 3, because milk was not available and Mama just didn't have enough milk. And I remember her feeding me a little piece of bread with a little bacon on it and pretending it was a horse and rider. Hop, 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 swallow, in German. So it went down, but I had whooping cough. So I keep saying afterwards, is my food still with me? But I survived because someone told Mama that if I was to live, she had to get a goat and give me goat milk. So she managed to get into the countryside and get a goat from a farmer. And after I started using goat milk, I became very, very healthy. And I really haven't had health problems like most children have had. We came here when I was, well, Paul and I visited our home when we were in Europe together. And I could remember every bit of it. I came to America when I was 6 and a half. And can remember very clearly, way back to about my 3rd birthday. But when I arrived at 6 and a half, my papa was very brave. I thank God so often that he had the courage with 7 children. I was the 8th one, but one little brother died in Europe. But he had the courage at age 53 to let loose of everything that he had in Europe. He was a master tailor, which was a very respectable career there. And come to this country not knowing the language. My older brothers and sisters knew it some because the schools taught English. And all he could take with him was each person had $50 to bring with them. And Mama prepared, in order not to spend too much money on food, she baked a lot of bread and dried it and cut it into little chunks, and we had dry bread and cheese on a 2-week trip on the ship to Rotterdam. When we arrived in Ellis Island, that was an ordeal, but because I was so little, I don't remember too much of that. But when we got off the boat, Papa and the children, and all of us walked, Papa and Mama and all of us walked along this broad sidewalk, broad boulevard, and he saw a banana vendor. In those days, people with vegetables or with fruit would push carts, you know, with what they were selling. And so he bought a whole stalk of bananas that would be for 9 of us. So he gave me one, but I lingered behind the other family and didn't realize that they were peeling the banana. And I took one bite, and that was not what I expected. Very highly overrated piece of food. And I was afraid to eat banana for another 6 months, I guess. Because it was September, I started in school right away.
Mommy.
And my 15-year-old, 16-year-old sister, 14-year-old sister, and 12-year-old brother and I all were in the first grade. And they had to manage to fit into these little tiny seats. And after a couple of days, they managed to get the girls into upper grades. But my brother and I were in the first grade for quite a while. And this would, well, I won't tell you the story. I learned English within a month or two. This thing that you hear about children, Spanish children, Vietnamese children, Indian children, having to be taught in their own language is absolutely false. Because a child immersed in the English language without an opportunity to share with other children in their own mother tongue, they learn in a hurry. I think in a matter of a month or two I was talking English. So I grew up you know the story of Topsy in Uncle Tom's Cabin? Topsy grew up, she just grew up. Nobody took any special pains with her. That was probably me. And so I found that books were my friends. And I love books. To this day, I love books. And in the and I love to write stories. And in the 5th grade, there was a contest among the 5th, 6th, and 7th graders to write a story anonymously. And the principal, her name was Mrs. Mile, she would read them, and the teachers and she would decide which were the best ones. Well, I wrote my story, and one day Miss Mile came into our room and she said, now, the room number is this room number, and I'd like to know who wrote this book story. Well, she read it, and all the kids started pointing to me because I had been telling stories to them. And I sank into my chair, I wanted to disappear. But to show that my family, that everyone was so busy with their own life and surviving, that it never occurred to me that they might be interested, that I had won out of 3 grades a story recognized by principal. And I never saved it, never made that much difference. And I look back now and I think that was too bad that we were not closer than that. A loving family. I don't remember fighting with my brothers and sisters, but each one went his own way. And then we lived in Chicago. The reason, this is interesting, immigrants who come to this country now are met with welfare assurance, welfare, I guess you call it, assistance, and food stamps, and just all kinds of help. Where when we came, relatives had to guarantee that they would take care of us for a whole year, make sure that we were no strain on the economy. And so my aunt and uncle had promised to do that. And all of the girls went to work right away, and my brother finished school, I guess. But anyway, that was my childhood. I came from Chicago to Lillian because my favorite aunt and uncle and their daughter had moved here, and his report of Lillian was practically the Garden of Eden, right? Well, he highly exaggerated it because my father and mother had moved on, and he thought he could grow vegetables and flowers by just planting them in the Garden of Eden. Well, without fertilizer, things get about this big. And after the first year, he gave up completely. But I learned to love Lillian, and I'm very grateful that the Lord brought me here. And that is the reason that I wrote the book in a town called Lillian, in order that other people could see it as it used to be 50 years ago, before the bay was polluted, when the water was still as clear as that swimming pool. And it was rural. There were no stores. There was no signs along the road between Lillian and Alberta. very, very beautiful place. So I met my husband Frank. My aunt and uncle both said, you have to meet the Sunday school teacher. We don't have a church, Protestant church in Lillian, so he started a fellowship in the schoolhouse. So I went with them, and he really was a very unusual teacher. I enjoyed him very, very much. I'll skip the part about my first marriage and divorce, because it was very unhappy. I had a little daughter who fell at 3 years of age and became a vegetable. And then Guy was part of that marriage too. But Frank and I were very, very well matched. He had a very searching mind, a creative person. He said he used to practice reading poetry out loud so that when he got married, he could read poetry to his wife. And I was the happy recipient of that gift. So then Paul and Elaine were our children from that marriage. And they inherited their dad's gifts, and I'm very, very grateful. And the Lord's been so good to us. And I made a journal for, where are you? Rochelle. For Rochelle and Keith, which maybe they'll pass around too. Thank you.
Thank you.